All right, welcome everybody. Good afternoon. We're really excited to be having this panel discussion here this afternoon on a Sunday afternoon when it's such a busy time. And it's really amazing to see everybody coming on to address such an important topic. So first, introduce myself. I'm Rachel Flickstein. I have the privilege of being a shlucha in Delaware. And I'm also very excited to be opening a new Lubavitch Girls High School in the upcoming year called Bais Chana High School in the Delaware Valley, starting with the 9th grade class. And obviously, to build such an institution, we want to really make sure that it's built on the foundation of the Rebbe's teachings and the Rebbe's insight and desires for what a Lubavitch Girls High School should look like. And so I've had the amazing privilege to consult independently with each of the members on our panel here today. And I want to start off just thanking each of you for the time that you've given me independently and also for being here today to address the questions that have come in both from parents and educators on how to really raise the Rebbe's daughters and how to educate this next generation of girls, which are the future Nashim Tzidkaniyos and really the current ones that are so special and so precious. So we'll introduce our panelists first, and then we'll delve into our questions. And if anybody does have other questions that you would like to ask or address, please feel free to, you can try putting them in the comments box or also email them to baischanahs@gmail.com. And we'll see if we get there because we have a lot of questions that came in advance. And if we don't cover those questions today, we hope to create more forums of panels also with our women's consultant Vaad HaChinuch for the high school and other opportunities. So on that note, thank you to Rabbi Shmuel Lew for being here. Rabbi Shmuel Lew is from London. He's the principal of the London Lubavitch Senior Girls High School over there. We also have Rabbi Wolf, Rabbi Yitzchak Wolf, the dean of the Cheder Lubavitch Hebrew Day School in Chicago. We have Rabbi Mendy Levin, the principal at the Cheder Chabad of Philadelphia, where my own children are privileged to attend. And we have Rabbi Shais Taub, shliach in 5 towns, and also an author and renowned lecturer. So thank you to each of you for being here, and let's get started with our questions. So for this, we're gonna ask the questions, and then we'll ask each panelist to take a turn in sharing your what you want to share on this topic, and we'll circulate who's beginning to answer each time. So Rabbi Lew, we'll start with you for this time. So nowadays, there's so much exposure and temptation, so many exciting things that are out there in the world. And the question came up from educators, from parents, how do we teach our daughters to feel passionate, to feel fulfillment, happiness, a personal relevance and connection to Hashem, to Torah and mitzvahs, to Yiddishkeit? How do we do that for our girls and help to give that to them?
Okay, that's a wonderful question, and it encapsulates the whole of chinuch. I would just like to share first a general point about chinuch that we heard from the Rebbe on Yud Aleph Nissen. I think it was Tafshin Mem Beis, just 40 years ago, on the Rebbe's 80th birthday. Yud Aleph Nissen, those sichos have a lot to say about chinuch, for educators and for parents. And I think that sicha answers all of the questions that we are anticipating. It's the details. How do you apply them in every specific case? And the Rebbe was learning from the Haggadah, V'higadeto levincha, that you should speak to your child. The 2 golden rules of chinuch and of parenting is, number 1, to have a positive relationship, a talking relationship, to speak with your child, ongoing, not just about mitzvahs and Torah and obligations, just generally speaking, to work on our relationship with our children. And secondly, and just as important, is to be a living example, a dugma chaya, of the behavior that we anticipate and that we'd like to anticipate from them. Bearing in mind that the child looks up to the parent as a giant and will like to be at least half as good as their parent. So the parent has to be double what they expect the child to be. And it's not telling them, it's showing them. I heard from, he's now a shaliach in Moscow. This was about 40 years ago. In Tovshem and Dalit, Zev Koravsky, he had two sons. And the choice of schools in Russia at that time, in the Soviet Union, was either to go to a school which had, it was a kindergarten 5 days a week. But as they got older, they would have to go 7 days a week or 6 days a week, including Shabbos. On the other hand, the other school has just 5 days a week throughout, but you had to eat school meals. You couldn't bring sandwiches. And he asked the Rebbe what to do. And the Rebbe told him to choose the first school where you could bring the sandwiches. The children were just 5 years old or 4. It was before they had to go for 6 days. Then a year or two later, when the question arose about Shabbos, he asked the Rebbe, what should we do about this? And the Rebbe said, you should follow the advice of good friends, what others did in the city. So I said, what did you do? And he said, Rubam kikulam, most of them advised to do what all the Baal Tshuvas then, there were hundreds, Baruch Hashem then, in the Soviet Union. The children would go on Shabbos, they would walk, they would have a sling in the hand, they would be absent, at least half of the times on Saturdays. They wouldn't come to school. They found different ways around it. But he said that I decided the chinuch, this is my point. He says, chinuch is a lo mashe omerim layeled. Chinuch is not what you tell your child. It's what you show your child. Shemarim, what you show. And he went up to the principal of the school, and specifically, and he told them, look, we are religious Jews. The principal might have even been Jewish, and my child is not coming on Saturdays. And the principal acquiesced on two conditions. One is that the child would achieve academically and wouldn't take advantage of the fact that he was missing 1 day a week. And secondly, that he would not, this is a much more difficult one, that the child of 6 years old would not ever divulge it to his friends why he's not there. And these boys are both shluchim today, like Talmidei Chachamim, great Talmidei Chachamim. So listen, every family, and with every girl and with every boy for that matter, you have to find the right way to communicate with them. If there are lines of communication open, and if the child sees our own enthusiasm and simcha sachayim, and simcha in doing a mitzvah, they will follow suit. It's you don't have to measure it every day. We have to believe in what we're doing. The child will feel that. And they go through struggles just like we do. And it won't always appear that they have the same enthusiasm about a mitzvah or about chassidus, whatever it is that we do, but if they see it with us, and if we work on like, for example, at the Shabbos table, to say something, prepare in advance. It shouldn't be too long. It should be interesting stories, nigunim. It's part of a relationship. It's not somebody controlling the other. It's someone who is in charge of the other, and that's the way to control and the way to guide them, according to their needs, will come from the fact that we're talking to them and showing them an example.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I love that story. It's what you show them, not what you tell them. So powerful. Beautiful. Okay, Rabbi Wolf, can you please share your thoughts as well?
So first of all, I would like to thank you for organizing this event. I think it's extremely important the greatest challenge we have today in the Jewish world and in the Chabad world is chinuch habanim v'abanis. So thank you so much for organizing this event. The major points, I think Rabbi Lew has already made, but I want to give it a certain, perhaps a different flavor and coming from a different angle. I was told by a mechanech, a Rebbe, who was a Rebbe for many years in Detroit, Rabbi Mendy Levin, who some of you may know, that prior to accepting the position of a melamed, a mechanech, he had a yechidus with the Rebbe. And he asked the Rebbe, what is the most effective way, or what we would call today, what methodology do I use to be able to get a very positive message to my Talmidim? And the Rebbe told him in Yiddish, zu weisen a Beispiel, to be a role model. I have to say that both Rabbi Stein and myself, although he is older than I am, but we shared the same melamed. I had many teachers in the Lubavitch yeshiva in Montreal, beginning from the age of 5, going through the age of 16. My Aleph Beis melamed was an older chassid. His name was Reb David Leib Morozov. He was the oldest son of the celebrated chassid Reb Chanya Morozov. When I walked into his classroom, together with my other classmates, 5-year-olds, there wasn't a toy in the room. Nothing other than 15 wooden old desks, a chalkboard, and the Rebbe sitting on a little wooden student desk with a pencil and an eraser and a little chumash or siddur, whatever it was, on his little desk. I can never forget that melamed. He walked, spoke, acted like a chassid, but what was even more important, he respected us. And because he respected us as little children, we respected him in turn. That is regarding being a role model. Teachers must be role models in every way. The way they speak, the way they address their students, the respect they show to their own students, and then they can expect respect coming their way from their own students. That applies to a 5-year-old, to a 10-year-old, and to a 15-year-old. Now regarding parents. Parents share a partnership with the school. Parents cannot do it on their own without a mokim chinuch. Mechanchim and mechanchos cannot do it alone without the parents. It is a partnership. I would like to just address briefly about the role model of parents. And I think that Rabbi Lew touched upon it, but I want to give you a simple example. I had the chus of spending 2 years in Melbourne, Australia, going back from 1975 to 1977. In a farm outside of Melbourne, many years prior to my arrival over there was an elderly chassid by the name of Reb Moshe Zalman Feiglin. He lived on a farm, no Jewish community, no Jewish day school, nothing of the sort. He was a chassid, and he raised his family on a farm, and his children went to a public school. So when I came in 1975, I met several of his 9 children. I think it was 9 or maybe 8, 9 or 10, but about 6 boys definitely I know he had. And I met one of them, Reb David Feiglin, who I had a nice chat with him. And I asked him the following question: how is it that every single child of your father, Reb Moshe Zalman, raising his children in the 40s and in the primarily in the 40s, How is it that they all remain dedicated religious Jews? And the following generation remained all connected to Yeshiva College, to Chabad, and if not Chabad, Yiddishkeit, Frumkeit. What was the secret that he had? You know what he told me? We woke up every day, 4 o'clock in the morning, hearing our father sobbing, crying over our Kapitel Tillim. We didn't need anything else. That thing, which perhaps doesn't appear so significant when you're talking about everything else that goes on in a household, but it's a perfect example. Without direct teaching or criticizing or telling a child what to do, what not to do, teaching by example. The Kapitel Tillim, he was crying for his children and for his Eineklech and for himself. In closing, we are role models. Mechanchim, mechanchis are role models. They are not only ones that are hired to teach facts and figures and history and Torah, I'm just putting it all together. They are role models, primarily, as the Rebbe said to Rabbi Stein. And so are parents. Parents are role models. And only if we try to model the same Yiddishkeit, the same Chassidishkeit, and show the same excitement, both in school and at home, over those things that are required to be excited when it comes to Torah, V'Yireh Shamayim, and Chassidus, we will be 100% successful. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm just going to repeat the question now because some people came on after we asked it, and then we'll ask Rabbi Levin for you to address it. The question is, how do we create, with all the other exposures and exciting things and temptations that are out there in the world, how do we create an environment where the girls can create their own connection, passion, excitement, fulfillment, happiness to their Yiddishkeit? And we've heard from Rabbi Lew and Rabbi Wolf beautifully about being a role model. And now we're moving to Rabbi Levin. And having a relationship also, I believe.
Okay, thank you. First of all, could you hear me?
Yes, we hear
Yes,
you.
wonderful. Okay, so thank you so much for this opportunity. For me, much more than what I have to share, I'm really excited to hear from senior Mechanchim and Mashpiyim, Rabbi Wolf, Rabbi Lew, and Rabbi Taub. So just for that, I'm grateful. So part of the question, as I hear it, is how do we create this personal connection for girls or for children with Torah and Yiddishkeit? And I think another part of the question is, especially for fun-loving girls and passionate girls, to how do we channel that? And so I want to approach this from a bit of a different angle than has been shared already. You know, they say when our children are very young and are babies and they start going ba, 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 we get all excited. They make a bit of noise and then they start talking and we're so excited they said their first word. And then we hear the chachmalach that they say. And then when our baby takes their first step, wow, and then they start running and we're so excited. And then they come to school and we don't want them to say any words and we don't want them to move at all. We want them to sit down and be quiet. And there's this misconception, I believe, that, you know, when a teacher thinks about what kind of student is the model student, you know, you know, I'd rather have a child that could just sit down and focus. And if you have a child that's excited and fun-loving, you know, that's a threat, that's scary to the system, that's scary to law and order that some schools would like to have or need to have in certain ways. So I think that there was something that really spoke to me when you look at the letter that the Rebbe wrote in for Rosh Chodesh Shvat of Tafshin Yud Aleph, which means the letter where the Rebbe gave instructions for what to do on the first Yud Shvat, on the first Yartzeit Histalkus of the Frierdiker Rebbe. So one of the instructions there was to go to, for those that are able to go talk to children, from children, and if possible, not from children. And the words that the Rebbe says is just I think, very, very telling and very amazing, to tell them how much the Frierdiker Rebbe loves them, to tell them how much the Rebbe demands of them, and how much trust the Rebbe has in them. And then here's, I think, maybe the strongest part of it to this question, which is, Asher soif soif yimalu es tafkidam b'hachzakas hayadus b'afotzas haTorah b'chol hameretz hachoim b'achayus shemiskulas hanoyar. That at the end of the day, they should fulfill their tachlis, the children this is, in strengthening Yiddishkeit and Torah with all the energy, warmth, and vitality, which are the virtues of youth. And that's a bad translation from meretz, choim, and chayus. Meaning that from that very first day, the Rebbe made very clear that we should be celebrating youthful energy and we should be challenging youthful energy. And it's not a steer to Yiddishkeit verkehrt. We should be using it for hachzakas hayadus and for learning and so on. So interestingly, my grandfather, his name was Rebbe Levin, and he lived in a few different places. He was on I guess you could call it a shlichus in Sunderland. And he, and I mean, the shlichus then was to be a chazan and a sheichet, but the Rebbe encouraged him to in yonim of chinuch and in other yonim of Yiddishkeit. And the Rebbe encouraged him that he should put together a group of girls to come together, and that the girls should, for a farbrengen. But one of the things the Rebbe said there was that the girls should actually take turns presenting at these farbrengens. And I think back then, it was a bit of a novelty. Now we all kind of know what you do on shlichus and the different ideas and the sitins and everything that goes on. But then it was a novelty. The Rebbe was telling him, gather these girls and have them be the leaders, have them present, have them take charge. And that's one way of focusing the youthful energy. I also think about, I guess, another Zayda who had a lot of energy. Rabbi Shmuel Lew, he's very well known that when he was a young bacher, he brought a wild goat into Zal. And it was clearly inappropriate. The Frierdiker Rebbe sent him out of yeshiva. And if you want to hear the whole story, another time. But so he was filled with the meretz, choim, and chayis that was miskulas hanoyar that young children have. Probably today would have had a nice big evaluation with a few different labels. And in the end, he definitely had a transformation, and he became a very famous chassid who used that energy in such an amazing way that he inspired people till today. People that knew him share with me his davening and his chayus, and he was actually a teacher. And in fact, the Frierdiker Rebbe, who had kicked him out of yeshiva for his wildkeit, later told him, so I've heard, that, I'll say in Yiddish and then in English, that people say that I don't have sons. The Frierdiker Rebbe only had daughters, but you are for me like a ben yachid. So the same child, the ben yachid, the only child. So the same boy who was filled with chay is bringing goats into Zal. He was someone that Tomchi Tmimim channeled to use that energy for Torah and Yiddishkeit. So it's not a steer and verkehrt. We have to think of ways to do that. And just to bounce off, and I'll finish with this for this question, Rabbi Lew shared before about being a dugma chaya and to the Soviet Jews, the response of mashmarim layeled, what the parents show to the children, is the most important thing. And you mentioned about some parents sending their kids to school and some not. So my grandmother was one of her parents did not send her to school, and her father, Rabbi Shmuel Lew, was arrested and was taken to prison for a long time. And friends of the family suggested that at least while he's in prison, they should send the girls to school, at least the girls, or I'm not sure about the boys, but at least my grandmother should be sent to school. And that way you will make it a lot easier to release him from prison. They're sending the kids to school. In Soviet Russia, this is. And so it was. My grandmother went to school for some time. When Rabbi Shmuel Lew was released from prison, the next morning he sees his young Musya takes her bags and is is leaving the house with school bags. Rabbi Shmuel never asks his daughter, where are you going? So she said, I'm going to school. So he said, if so, I'm going back to prison. And so Mashemarim LaYeled, in terms of, Baruch Hashem, today we don't have to have that type of Mesiras Nefesh. What we show our children definitely has a tremendous impact.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And I love the practical end of it, of channeling that youthful energy towards Yiddishkeit. And that's exactly what the question is. How do we get the passion for Yiddishkeit? Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, Rabbi Taub, on to you.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's an honor to be here. So thank you for involving me in this event, as well as your the planning of your new endeavor, which should be with great success. Hashem should bless you with every bit of success.
Thank you.
And also thank you to my co-panelists, Rabbi Lew, Rabbi Wolf, Rabbi Levin. It's an honor to be here. And for full disclosure, I think I'm the odd man out here as far as not being actually involved day to day, at least within a Moisad Chinuch. And so you'll have to take my words with a grain of salt. It's easy to offer advice from the outside, but I do want to just contextualize any comments I make before I do so. So we asked a couple of questions. You wanted me to respond to the second question?
The idea of how do we inspire the girls to be passionate, have a personal connection, find fulfillment and happiness in their relationship with their Yiddishkeit, with Hashem, Torah and mitzvahs.
Yeah.
And there are so many other temptations out there today.
Wow. That's such a big question because it covers so much. And we heard some wonderful perspectives from all of my esteemed colleagues. And I don't know if I have any big bombshell or any big news flash to add that hasn't been covered. I mean, basically what we're talking about here is about the human aspect, about the relationship, about the connection. It seems to be in one way or another, everyone here is saying that one point, that ultimately it comes down to the parent or the educator having a relationship with the child. There's a saying, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. which means that you could be really smart and you could even have really true information to share, but people aren't going to be able to receive it from you unless there's that connection. In Chassidus, it explains that's the role of Midas HaYesod, which is connection, hischabros, connection between two people. And the Alter Rebbe in Igeres HaKodesh gives an example. There could be a father who's preparing a lesson to give to his son, but he's speaking to himself, and the son happens to overhear it. Just hearing the very same words that the father would go and deliver to the son afterwards, the same exact words will not land. They won't resonate because the father's not speaking to the son. It's an interesting thing. You can have all the right information and you can be eloquent, you can be good at explaining it, but what really makes the difference is the human element, the connection. In Klali Chinuch Va'adrocha from the Frierdiker Rebbe, he speaks about the difference between Heira and chinuch. Heira is instruction. You could have a brilliant lecturer who's an expert in his field or her field, and this lecturer gets up and delivers a beautiful lecture, and it's explained well, and everything's organized and set forth in a very clear way. But that's just Heira. Heira is so you can compose a beautiful lecture. Chinuch, the Frierdiker Rebbe says, you got to get your hands dirty, because chinuch is you're not teaching a class or a lesson, you're teaching a student, a real live, living, breathing person. And when you're teaching a real live, living, breathing person, the nature of people is that we have our flaws and our foibles and our rough edges. And so if you want to just give a beautiful lecture and leave, you can stay clean. But if you want to be a mechanech, if you want to really educate, you have to be willing to get down and dirty and deal with the inherent flaws and struggles and challenges that are inherent to being a neshama in a body here in this world. So to answer your question, I'll try to be succinct after all of that arichos, is that it comes down to, and this is something we've heard from all of our my colleagues, the co-panelists here already, I'm just repeating it. It really comes down to connection. Are you relatable? Are you empathetic? Are you compassionate? If yes, then you can teach a child anything. And Michlal Hein Ata Shemei Alav, you can infer the opposite. So really, it comes down to that human connection. I'll just add one more thing. There was a school that asked me to consult regarding a curriculum about Tanya, which is a subject that I have a lot of passion in. And after a lot of back and forth and a lot of discussion about what my role would be as a consultant, I told them, I said, listen, honestly, if you want to get the most bang for your buck, if you want to use me in the most productive way, don't have me write a curriculum. Bring me in for teacher training. And I explained very clearly, you can have the greatest curriculum in the world, but what makes it or breaks it is who's teaching it and how they're teaching it and how they're connecting with the students that they're teaching. So instead of creating a more elegant lesson plan, which is beautiful, and obviously we want the best of both worlds. We want our cake and eat it too, obviously. Rebbe always wanted everything. But instead of, if you have to prioritize, instead of having a better and better lesson plan, let's first work on the human resources. Let's strengthen the teachers, because ultimately that's what makes it or breaks it. It's that human relationship. And if we have that in place, then to answer your question, the girls will be engaged. They will feel connected. They'll feel there's a place for them. They'll feel that even with their quirks and their idiosyncrasies and the uniqueness of their personality, that they can find meaning and connection within Yiddishkeit. But it all comes down to that relationship. And it's not just the parent that has to be that meaningful person in the child's life. It's ideally every single mechanech, every educator that the child comes across during their career in school.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. The power of the connection and the relationships. And it's just interesting from a shlichus perspective. That's really also all of shlichus is about the relationships that we're building and the connection. That's what helps to inspire everybody is that attention, that love, and meeting everyone where they are, and investing in the relationship. So, wow, what amazing answers. So much food for thought just for our first question of being the Dug Machaya and the lifelong impact that has, and the practical aspect of channeling the passion for youth towards Torah and mitzvahs, and obviously also building that relationship component. So now to move to our next question. You know, the teenage years are very unique in that they mark the transition from childhood into adulthood. And so there's, you know, finding that sense of identity outside of the family unit and also trying to discover the independence at such an age. And as educators and as parents, we still have the responsibility to teach our children, to raise them, to guide them. And the question comes up of, you know, how do you make a balance? Where do boundaries come in? Rules, expectations, and how much room do we give to teens for them to create their own choices and decisions? When is there maybe a time that we should be more strict about something and really stick to a specific insist on something specific for them. And on the flip side, we don't want the opposition and the resentment that can come very easily. The second you say a rule or a boundary comes the pushback, especially at such an age. So how do you create that balance of giving them those boundaries while also giving them the room to grow and have that independence that they're building and working on? So for this, we're going to start with Rabbi Wolf, since we'll switch the order up each time. Rabbi Wolf, if you can please unmute yourself so we don't hear you.
Okay, I'm going to be very general in my answer. Okay, and perhaps with specific instances. Children, if you talk about children and teenagers, are our most valuable resource we have. If you want to know what's on the mind of a teenager or of an older child, preteen, have an honest to goodness discussion with them, and you'll hear what's on their mind. And you will get to know what they need most. If you're talking about teenagers, adolescents, the changes that occur in their personal lives, and the fact that they're becoming more and more independent is really a time for confusion. That's why there can be mood swings, there can be a lot of changes, and you can look at your teenager and say, boy, what a moody kid we have over here. They're not moody. There's certain changes that go on. Now, one of the common things that you will hear from students who look back at their teenage years, or even younger, somewhat younger, you will always hear the common comment they make. They never really cared about us. And it's very common to hear them. Do they really care about me? Do they care? Did they care about us? Is there anyone? And by the way, there is a lot of truth. I have a good friend, a shliach in Seattle, Washington, and he tells me that from time to time, on an Erev Shabbos or on a birthday, he will make calls to his Talmidim l'sha'ava of 30, 40, or even 50 years ago to show that he really cares.
Wow.
Caring is not just making sure that they know the material. You know what? You'll give that student extra time. Of course, giving a student extra time is very important. But the smile to a student and all of that is also of extreme importance. But I want to touch over one more nakuda, which I think is very important. How do we share our passion and our excitement to our children? You know, the Gemara talks about avu, bameha v'zohar tfei. My zohar tfei does not necessarily mean it's going to be my children's zohar tfei. So how do I address that? How do I make sure that they do have a zohar tfei? If I will show ongoing excitement in my Yiddishkeit, and there'll be not just, we have a loose.
Rabbi Wolf, you still there? All right. I guess we'll come back to him when he comes back. Oh, there, you're back.
He's back.
Okay. You cut out for a minute, Rabbi Wolf. No, he's there. He's there. Rabbi Wolf, you cut out for a second. You want to?
So if there are a lot of oys in our Yiddishkeit, it turns into a place which Yiddishkeit is not exciting. But I want to give a certain example of the chinuch I received, which I think is super important. What is the centerpiece of Jewish life? By the way, when you talk about Hashomer Shabbos, it's synonymous with being a religious Jew, because Shabbos is the centerpiece of Yiddishkeit, of Jewish life. Maybe even more so than Yom Tov. Yom Tov comes around once in a while. Shabbos is that centerpiece. My mother, when we woke up Friday morning, the table was set as if Shabbos is 5 minutes away. There was an excitement to Shabbos. It was the centerpiece. My wife, Gesundheit, tries even to make the table sometimes Thursday night. We get up early in the morning, Friday. It's a beautiful set table. The table is set. Shabbos is coming. And when you sit down finally by the Shabbos meal, there has to be a certain excitement. You don't need a long meal. You don't need a 2-hour meal. But if the father or the mother, for that case, will suddenly, after the fish, be sleeping on the sofa, then Shabbos is not important, or reading even a kosher magazine on the sofa. So it loses the centerpiece of Jewish life. By the way, excitement in Yiddishkeit doesn't mean you have to, who knows what to create to make it excitement. I heard from Rabbi Twersky Sr. that a fellow, a young man, wrote into the Rebbe, one of his kids is going a bit off, and so on and so forth. And the Rebbe answered him, I don't remember exactly the words, but the Rebbe answered him to make sure that they use the most nicest dishes and everything that they can get and put on the Shabbos table. And it should be the best food. Friday night, under no circumstances, can be yaitze with a meager meal of a sandwich. It shows that there's, and I heard about that, by the way. And it cannot be, it has to be the true centerpiece of our lives. And the same applies to all the other Chagim and Yom Tovim and areas in Yiddishkeit. They will choose the excitement where they will be most excited and the most zoet fei. But in general, Yiddishkeit will be something exciting. And once you're raised with the excitement of Yiddishkeit, if suddenly they're going to have chaverim that will push them in the other direction, they won't feel comfortable. At the end of the day, they won't feel comfortable. They'll be missing the excitement of their youth. Gam ki yaskin lo yoseh. And that is regarding not only what they study and what they learn, the whole derech hachayim, how they live, how the parents express their Yiddishkeit, how exciting the parents are involved when it comes to Yiddishkeit matters. And I think that's how we create excitement, and that's how we can be sure that there'll be continuity. And you know what? There'll be differences from one child to the other. The zoet fei will vary, but being a frum yid and being raised beruach Yisrael Sava and beruach Chabad, that will definitely carry over. Sometimes it gets lost for a year or 2 or 3 or 5 years. A mitten can get lost, but it will eventually come back. But the more has to be a burning flame, a burning fire. Then it will definitely be machzir el.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, going on to Rabbi Lew.
Yes, I'm hearing such fascinating things from everyone. Just want to mention, we have the rules. There was a very prominent mechanech in Eretz Yisrael, and had a high position in the whole Reshet. And he once went, and there are many letters from the Rebbe to him. And once he went into Yechidus and he told the Rebbe, he's summed up everything into 10 rules. And he gave the Rebbe the 10 rules. And the Rebbe said, you forgot the 11th rule. He said, what's that? He said that there are no rules. In other words, it's important to know what we have to do. That's how I interpret it. And at the same time, that different children will get the message at different stages. As we just heard from Rabbi Wolf, from all the other esteemed speakers, that doing what's right will always be right. And we deal, all of our senior leadership meetings in schools, always about people who are not really responding as well as we want. And how do you move it a bit here, a bit there? We said the pasuk chinuch lana al pi darkoi, that you have to have the right approach to each of the 4 sons, each of the 4 daughters that are at the Seder. One has to have the correct approach. And since the Kololi HaChinuch was mentioned, may I say that in the Kololi HaChinuch, in chapter 14, the Frierdiker Rebbe says, he speaks about having, getting obedience from students, from mushpa, from chinuch. Not, again, it's not teaching, it's educating. And he says, if a child feels that the instruction or the role modeling is coming from a position of knowledge of that child, love and caring, they feel that the mechanech knows them, cares about them, and is interested to see in their progress, not because of themselves, but because of that child, they will accept even an ironclad discipline. And what I always say is that the best incentive that we want to instill in our children is that they want to make their parents happy. As much as peer pressure is an extremely powerful force, the caring about what the parents, to make the parents happy, that should be the biggest reward and the biggest deterrent, the biggest disincentive to inappropriate behavior should be not wanting to let the parents down. I just heard a few days ago from a parent, told me that years ago, this parent, an older person, but they said that one of their children was in a class where there was a powerful, charismatic figure who unfortunately was going in the wrong direction and was taking a lot of people with them. And they succeeded for a while, but all of them came back, all of them. But one of them told this parent, who told it to me, that I felt suddenly that I was being I was being drawn, being hypnotized, but I felt I could never do that to you and mommy. I could never do that to my parents. That was this thing. Years later, that child is a parent of their own teenage children. But the child told the parent, and the parent told this to me just in the last couple of days. So what we want is to realize that getting our children excited about things and standing up to everything else, as we heard, it's the atmosphere, it's the home, it's the role modeling. A woman came to the Rebbe and she had a little baby in her arm. And she said, give me a bracha that he should grow up like you. So the Rebbe said, the first step is you should be a mother like my mother was. And in other words, it's just what, and the Alter Rebbe's brother also said why they had such children is they saw the example of their mother, that she showed what was important to her and what wasn't. That's as far as parenting is concerned. As far as the school is concerned, it's very important to recognize that the children develop at different stages. I mean, the question is always, what if they have davening in school and the girl doesn't daven? Well, the boy. I was in South Africa about 5 years ago for Gimel Tammuz, and they asked me to speak in not to the staff of a non-Chabad school, like a Mizrahi type school. Mm-hmm. And it was on the day of Gimel Tammuz, and there were about 30 teachers, and they said, the main question is, what happens with a kid who doesn't want to daven? What would the Lubavitch Rebbe say? What does Lubavitch Rebbe's view say? I don't know explicitly. I can only tell you what I believe is based on the Rebbe's approach. But we've had it many times, and I always say you cannot force someone to daven, because davening itself is a relationship. Mm. So one has to, what I say is, you can ask that every kid has to have they can't sit and read a book at that time. You have to sit there. I'm not, the main thing is speaking privately to that pupil and be makar of them and saying, would it be easier if you just had to say 3 pages instead of 25, 50 pages? For example, just an example, I'll be darker. What that person is ready for, and I've seen it work on people who became very, very great Hasidic role models themselves. And when they were younger, this was the case. So, and it's also important, not also, but very important to have extracurricular, non-formal education. Ultimately, I'm not sure if that's going to be one of the questions here, but that a school should have a Benot Chabad program, and in the teaching as much as possible. It's our biggest challenge is recruiting young female role models who are Hasidic, who feel, who and they're role models, and they have knowledgeable, and to have that type of a program, because there are some people who might not be that good at the academic side or at the formal side, but they excel in chidon and in production and all the different things that are done in the schools today. So that's very important.
Okay. Wow. Thank you so much. I love that the source of the rules is coming from a place of love and care. It's so critical. It's very powerful. And let's move on to, and everything else too, but that just really stood out for me. Let's move on to Rabbi Taub. You're next.
Yeah. Okay. So we were talking about the balance of the relationship with setting boundaries and rules. That was sort of the theme we're on now.
Yes.
Okay. There's a story about a young woman, a teenager. She was 19 years old, and she was in Yechidus with the Rebbe. Actually, she went in with her father. Her father was Peter Kalms from Kingsley, from London, who I met a couple of times. And he had many Yechidusin, and he had many correspondences, directions, guidance from the Rebbe. And I think at least on a couple of occasions, he brought his daughter Tanya into Yechidus. And at one point, she was at a very pivotal juncture in her life, because I think her father wanted her to go to seminary in Eretz Yisrael. And she had some artistic talent. She wanted to develop the artistic talent. So he encouraged her to speak about it with the Rebbe. And the Rebbe told her his honest opinion that she wanted to go to art school instead of seminary to develop her artistic talent. So the Rebbe told her, to be quite honest, art school isn't just art school. It's a whole culture. It's a whole environment. And it's not a wholesome place. And why would you want to put yourself in that kind of strain, that kind of stress? This is not even my main point of telling the story, but I think just that itself you can learn from. The way that Rebbe presented it was not like, no, you're not allowed to go there. The Rebbe presented it like, why would you want to burden yourself with that extra nisayon, with that challenge? In other words, there's 2 ways of presenting something. One is, no, you're not allowed. The other way is, I'm telling you for your benefit, I don't want you to feel extra strain, and I'm sure that this will cause you strain. But at any rate, so the Rebbe told her it's not a great idea. So she said, but I'll never know if I have what it takes to be an artist. So the Rebbe told her a very practical eitzah. The Rebbe said you could hire private tutors and you could learn all the technique that you want. You just don't have to be in that environment. So she wasn't exactly thrilled about that answer. And it was apparent from her reaction that she was going to just accept it. And the Rebbe didn't settle for that reaction. In other words, she was ready to accept it. And the Rebbe sort of raised the issue again. It could have just been left alone, and she was going to go begrudgingly along with the Rebbe's suggestion. But the Rebbe actually raised the issue again and said, you wrote in your letter something similar. and she had written a letter, a pond that she brought with her to the Yechidus. The Rebbe said, you use the word that you're committed to Lubavitch. And the Rebbe said, we don't want commitment. We want inspiration. And I just think that that's such an incredible lesson. Here, the Rebbe had somebody who was willing to go along, was willing to follow along. And the Rebbe told her, I don't want you to do this begrudgingly. I don't want you to do this because you're committed. And it's very interesting because so much is spoken of in Chassidus, particularly about Kabbalah's oil, about accepting the yoke of the kingdom of heaven, and about Nasiv and Nishma, first committing to doing before we even fully understand. And obviously that's an idea that has its place and is a foundational idea. One doesn't contradict the other. At the same time, the Rebbe was saying, I don't want you to just do it because you're committed. I want you to feel inspired. I want this to resonate with you. There's so much that can be learned from that, but I think one thing that can be learned from it is just the fact that if I'm the parent or the educator and I'm not satisfied with a child or a student doing something begrudgingly, that speaks volumes. Because if you think about it like this, if it's merely a power struggle where I'm the big adult, I'm in charge and I need to get my way. So what do I care if you go along with it enthusiastically or begrudgingly? As long as I win. Sometimes you defeat your opponent and they're not happy about being defeated, right? But I won, so I'll take the win. Yeah, that's if you're approaching it as adversarial. So then you don't really care if the person is thrilled about going along with it, as long as your will gets carried out. But if you look at it, and I think this is the way that Rebbe was explaining to Tanya Kalms in that Yechidus, if you look at it as a partnership, I'm not here to assert my will over you. I'm here to work with you to facilitate a good outcome for you. In fact, the Rebbe says this in the Yechidus, that I want you to see how this is to your benefit. And I think that that's up to the adult in the relationship to understand that, yes, there's something called Kabbalah's oil. And when we can't explain or the child's not ready yet to understand, sometimes there is such a thing as Nasiv and Nishma, and you'll understand when you're older. Sometimes, yes. But if we can at all possibly create a teachable moment where the child will appreciate that I'm not there to put a damper on their fun. I'm not there to be restrictive. I'm not there to ruin their life, God forbid. But I'm trying to facilitate something that'll be good for you, that the outcome will be good for you. I think that has to be something that the adult in the relationship has to pursue. It's not enough just to get the child to do the right thing. It's part and parcel of the educational experience. Not just the child does the right thing, but they understand why it's the right thing. And this is one of the Rebbe's big ideas you see all the time. Doing the right thing is ultimately never, ever, ever in conflict with personal fulfillment. To the contrary, doing the right thing will always be good for you. In the end, Mesiras Nefesh isn't even really Mesiras Nefesh, because that's the key to ultimate fulfillment. In the end, you don't lose, you only win. You just have to be able to, delay gratification or readjust what your expectations were or change your goals. But ultimately, Hashem looked into the Torah as the blueprint to make the world. Therefore, the world cannot be a contradiction to Torah mitzvahs. Therefore, the formula for success in this world, as an individual, your path to fulfillment is always going to be promoted and facilitated by doing what Hashem wants. And I think if we make sure that that's a goal, that it disarms the power struggle, the potential power struggle. It takes away so much of the conflict. And ultimately, I think this is the most important thing. When a child finally tastes this, Taimuru Kitev Havaya, they taste that this is actually good for them, then they become self-starters. We don't have to constantly nudge and remind. The child has incorporated internally their own moral compass where they have their own motivation to do the right thing, because they know that ultimately you don't lose personally by doing the right thing.
Wow, amazing. So setting boundaries is a partnership.
The partnership.
That's a new way of different perspective. Beautiful. Okay, Rabbi Levin, on to you.
Okay, I just first want to address a comment in the chat. Someone wrote, even if they know you care, sometimes it's hard to show them the beauty of Yiddishkeit. What would be advice for that? And I know a lot of that has been said addresses that, but I want to share something that I came across that the Rebbe apparently told staff from a Bais Yaakov school. And I guess I'll read it just in English. It's very brief. That you should always speak to the girls about the greatness of Hashem, the greatness of creation, and Yikras HaAdam, how precious man is. To emphasize more the beauty of Yiddishkeit, the sweetness, the pleasantness, noyam of mitzvahs, than putting down olam hazeh. And this means to focus more on the asay toiv, on doing good, than the surmeira, than keeping away from bad. So I feel that message for educators and parents is incredibly important. In terms of this question that we're discussing now about boundaries and versus independence and all of that, and of course there does need to be that balance of the chesed and the gvura. Children do need boundaries, adults need boundaries as well. Torah Mitzvahs is filled with halachos and very specific things that we have to do in very specific ways. But I think that, as has been said, that children will respond to rules when they feel connection. When they feel connected to the adults that are creating those rules, they will respond to them. And when they feel disconnected, it's just rules. As a principal, I see it in classrooms when teachers are present, when teachers smile, when you just see the chemistry. You don't need 76 rules of how to sit and how to this and how to that. You have compliance. You have children who grow, children who learn, and children who want to do what's right. Just a note on Kabbalah soil, it's interesting. The word is not Sima soil, it's Kabbalah soil. It's not that we need to place a yoke on our students. They need to be mekabel. A yid has to be mekabel the oil, has to do the action of accepting the yoke. And so that's not something that we can make happen. That's something that we can help happen. That's something we can, like Rabbi Taub was saying, we can facilitate that. Something interesting also coming from Purim is that when the Yidden said Nasa v'nishma, and what happened first was Kaf Aleim Har Kegigis, and Alter Rebbe explains that Hashem showered the Yidden he embraced them with a tremendous amount of love. So when you have this tremendous amount of love, the response is automatically, of course, even if I don't understand, I don't like it, what you're telling me to do is very unpleasant, but I have this connection with you, so it's much easier for me to do what you want me to do. And of course, later in Purim, then the next level of maturity is that we can have the Nasa, the Nishma without that we're ready to, the child matures to the next stage where they're ready to, on their own, accept it. I think maybe the takeaway here is for parents and educators is something which we all struggle with, especially in today's day and age, is presence. Mm-hmm. Connection comes through presence with our children. This is probably very hard for many of us with our busy schedules, but making a few minutes a week, hopefully more than a few minutes a week, but halavai, a few minutes a week, that we are present to our individual children, and that we don't have our phone nearby. They see our eye contact, we're smiling with them. Also, the connection could come through being real with our students and our children, not putting on, not being fake, not being legitimate, being real. Our children seeing that we accept them and their personal journeys, that's connection. And I think another piece in connection is keeping ourselves in check. Sometimes when a child breaks a boundary, our impulse is to get upset. Probably most times our impulse is to get annoyed or upset, and to be able to keep ourselves in check before we impose a boundary, to make sure there is that connection that will enable the child to learn from the boundary that we're putting there. And I think another piece is that to add to this conversation is, both as educators, as mechanchim, and as parents, we need to try to be dogmachayis of having boundaries. Do our children know that we have our own boundaries, or do we just tell them what their boundaries are? And it could be in anything from Torah, mitzvahs, technology, and all that, that when our children know that we are disciplining ourselves, even when it's not the most exciting thing and not the most, would rather be on our phones than whatever it is, and we don't do that, that in itself will show our children that, the value of leading by example, not just by telling them what to do.
Beautiful. Wow. It's really redefining boundaries, not being there to control our kids, but being there to teach them, and to keep that in mind as a role model with our presence. And really, it all comes back down to that connection in where they're coming from that place of love and care, and making sure that it's for them and not to them or over them. Beautiful. Wow. Thank you all so much for that input for that question. I'm torn which question to go to next, because I want to get at least 2 more in before our time is up. So maybe if we can keep everyone's answers a little bit shorter this time, so we can maybe fit 2 more questions in before the end, that would be amazing. So our next question goes on to the role of schools, as Rabbi Wolf said, and others, about the partnership that we have between a school and between the parents. And it's really important to know, well, what is that role of the school for the parents to know what to expect, and also for the school also to hold themselves accountable for what they're giving to the children, to the teens in their chinuch. And the question is, in addition to just covering the academic material, what else is a school meant to provide? When it comes to teaching about midais, is that through just the academic component of school that also we should throw midais in, or should there be something specifically geared towards refining midais and growth and inner work? What about when it comes to practical life skills like sewing and cooking and building a home? Is that all stuff that is only meant to be learned at home, or is there room for teaching that extracurricularly or even within the curriculum? What about the long-term goals of being able to learn independently after school hours, or after school bichlal, when they go on into life, to have that passion and desire to continue their learning? So where does school stand in its role in those different areas? For this question, we're going to start with Rabbi Taub. Taking turns.
Okay. Wow. I haven't gone first yet. I was depending on when Bnei Yisrael were in the Midbar, they used to have Shevet Don, who was marching in the back, and they would pick up the lost articles. So I was depending on bringing up the rear after all the pearls of wisdom had been shared, that I could just. Okay. Now I forgot what the question was. Remind me.
What is the school's role in chinuch? Is there a role beyond academics, even within academics, secular academics?
Right.
Should they be infused with Yiddishkeit and beyond?
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I saw a letter from the Rebbe. Actually, I was learning this letter, I think it was last night. No, yeah, it was last. We have this thing. This is not a plug. I just happen to have this on my desk. 30 letters, 30 days, that we're learning the Igros of the Rebbe every day for 30 days before Yud Aleph Nisan. So last night's letter, the Rebbe said something very interesting to a supporter of a school. It happened to be the school in Melbourne. And so the Rebbe said that once upon a time, the role of a school was to save a child from being an ignoramus. That if there wouldn't be a school, the child wouldn't learn, and they would be an amaretz, they'd be ignorant. But they'd still be observant, because the environment was sufficient to keep the child in the fold. So the worst case scenario, if they didn't have the right education, they'd be observant, but they'd be ignorant. The Rebbe says, today the school is filling a different role, which is not only can we not rely on the environment to keep children Jewishly connected, but in many ways the environment is hostile, and we need to build fortresses. That actually says we have to build fortresses as safe places for children, and that it's not, the stakes today are not whether they will be a scholar or an ignoramus, but rather whether they will remain within Yiddishkeit at all. So I think it's interesting to sort of step back for a second and think about that. Is there still an idea of students who are capable of becoming scholars and excelling in their studies? Absolutely, obviously there is. And for a child who's capable of doing that, if we don't facilitate that, if we don't allow that to happen, that's I don't even want to finish the sentence. It's absolutely vital that someone who has the potential to be a scholar is given every tool and every resource and every opportunity to do so. At the same time, is that the primary purpose of our schools today? No, it's not. It's not. The primary purpose of our schools today is to keep children engaged and connected and identifying with Yiddishkeit. So it's a lot more than just education today in the classic sense of teaching information and even teaching skills, how to learn. This is really, you think about it, everything that a child used to imbibe from the environment around them, the school now has to provide. So whereas a child maybe didn't go to school 150 years ago, but just walking around the shtetl, Yiddishkeit was in the air, and they were going to stay within the fold. Okay, so maybe all they could do is say Tehillim. They couldn't learn, but they would stay Jewishly engaged. Today, the school has to actually serve at least part of that role in creating that environment, which goes way beyond academics. Do we need to have excellent academics? No question, absolutely, especially for those children who are capable of excelling in Torah scholarship. But the primary purpose of the school really is to create an environment which is way beyond just an academic experience, where children feel that Yiddishkeit is life. So it can't just be an academic subject. Here I'm learning Chumash, I'm learning Navi, I'm learning Gemara. The school now is filling a totally different role than it used to, historically speaking. And we have to therefore think about schools, and we have to think about the role of an educator in new ways. Now, I think we touched upon a lot of it already, speaking about, I'll use a word, the holistic aspect of education, that it's not just about conveying information, it's about a relationship. But maybe I'll add to that and say that the school has to cater to all parts of a child, not just the child's mind, but everything, their creativity, their sense of playfulness, their social interactions, every aspect of a human being, not just intellectually, but also emotionally and socially, we have to find ways to connect so that we're creating that sviva, that all-encompassing environment. And therefore, it goes way, way, way beyond today just properly teaching a subject and having children who can pass a test.
Wow. The wholesome chinuch, beyond just the academics. Okay, yeah. Beautiful. Rabbi Levin, we're on to you.
Okay, I think the short answers was wishful thinking.
It's okay. You can say what needs to be said. It's fine.
So just to bounce off what Rabbi Taub was saying and about the role of the school, I just want to share first from a letter of the Rebbe to graduates of a teaching course in Beis Rivka, and I'll just say it in English, that the Rebbe writes, not only to teach information and wisdom to your students, rather, in fact, primarily to teach them a way of life in the years of their education, which will serve as a foundation for their lives when they grow up and are on their own. And there's a famous sicha, Yud Shvat Tafshin Tes Vav, and just a small snippet of it, also again echoing what Rabbi Taub just said. The Rebbe says like this, that the Seder is when you accept a student to Talmud Torah, even to Cheder, even to Yeshiva Ketana, even to Yeshiva Gedola. So not only could it be that the student doesn't know a tremendous amount of Torah, but he might even be lacking in fulfilling mitzvahs. And he might be lacking in the most important thing, a deep recognition that a Yid needs Yiddishkeit, and he cannot live without that. So therefore, the role of the yeshiva is to build the child from the bottom up. First, the main thing, which is emunah in Hashem, then kiyum mitzvahs ma'asiyos, doing actual mitzvahs, and then making him a mitzias of Torah and learning Torah. It's pretty fascinating for even a yeshiva gedola that you might have students that don't yet fulfill mitzvahs properly or lacking in basic conviction. And the Rebbe clearly addresses that the role of the yeshiva, and I would say the same would apply to a girls' school, is to make sure that they have everything from the bottom and up. You asked a few different things about other parts of education, but I'll stop there. Maybe others will chime in on that.
Okay. All right. Rabbi Lew, thank you so much, Rabbi Levin.
Right. Yeah. In addition to the very salient points that were just made, and to say it briefly, of course, sewing and cooking and budgeting, these are actually part of the Mudei Kodesh in a sense. Teach them how to run a kosher kitchen. And the different foods that are noheg, that are customary to eat at different times of the year, just for example. And dressmaking or sewing, generally, it's a good skill to have, and sometimes it can be even, it can be the source of parnassah one day for those who are that way inclined. But it means, as we heard, it means taking the person in totally. And special inspiration and information for Yiras Shamayim and Midas Tovos, as we heard, that's the basis. Emunah and Torah, mitzvahs ma'asiyos, and Torah knowledge. It's also important that in all of the subjects they do, lahavdil, whatever reason, if they're doing it because your constituency of the school are people who want secular, or because Gzeras HaMalchus and there's no choice, whatever it is, to make a virtue out of the necessity and to utilize that subject to be able to promote concepts of Yiras Shamayim and Yiddishkeit, besides the fact that sometimes in some communities, the pupils will feel more attracted to the Yiddishkeit, knowing that their other intellectual needs are. I once asked the Rebbe about studying certain things on the curriculum. We're supposed to be brief, so I can't give the whole story, but the Rebbe gave an answer, a one-liner, and said, speak to Rabbi Chadakov, since you're in New York now. Now, I had an hour and a half with Rabbi Chadakov generally, but one of the points was, I said, these are optional subjects. The Rebbe said, what's your question? if it's required, but if you take a certain course, the government requires you, in order to get a qualification, it requires you to do certain things. So the Rebbe said, what's the question? It's about Shakespeare. And so I said to Rabbi Hadakov, what do you mean, what's the question? And maybe I don't have to offer that option. He said, if somebody wants to do a subject, they shouldn't have to go to an outside college or something in order to take it. It should be done in this way and with guidance. As far as Yiddishkeit, Midas Tov, Chassidishkeit, besides, as we just mentioned, it being incorporated in a sense, or part of every single subject that's done, we have an assembly every week. And we try to monitor the situation, and the head teacher, I'm the principal, I take the assembly, a girl says it's about Torah, this, and they speak about Tilim, Shabbos Mavach, and whatever it is, there's, different prizes once a week. But we try to find out through the grapevine, through people who are closer to the ground, what is the need at this moment? Is somehow or another, is Avos Yisrael needing to be strengthened at the moment, or some other point? And I try to make that, there's a theme, always a story in the assembly, and I write it up beforehand, and it's sent out an email to every parent, and also to a big email list of other people, for others, outside of Chabad even, giving reports on the assembly. Even more than that is the importance of encouraging girls to have, and boys, to have mashpia. Somebody they can talk with, especially the younger teachers. They have the biggest, most powerful effect. They're not that much older usually. And the pupils should feel there's someone they can ask questions to. There should be sometimes certain moments, certain classes, once a month, they submit questions, and I go in, or a teacher goes in, a mashpia figure, a woman. I've told our head teacher that I would find funding for anything. We just had a couple of weeks ago, they had a singer, a Hasidah, a woman from Vaad, who sings and encourages them. They had a tremendous advantage. Even more than all of that is having a Shabbaton. Yeah, we try to have it from time to time with specific classes. This 8th grade, the 9th grade, the 10th grade, whatever it is, and they might have it going somewhere to bringing their own food, or they might have it at a Chabad house under the facility of that Chabad house. There's a lot of creativity in this in itself, and very often, at least once a year, we try to have a Shabbaton for the whole school, and everyone's there, and it needs a lot of planning. It needs a lot of knowing how to deal with the curveballs that are part of life and that are part of the makeup of the student body. That's you come trying to benefit everybody. One has to be versatile, and the relationship between the parents and the school and the pupil, just in one line, is that the central person. The Rebbe writes this in a number of igros. He writes it to Hanholas in a very sharp way. He says, you are there because of the pupils and not the other way around. And when I asked the Rebbe in that same letter, it was a few pages, I said, how do I advise girls when they're leaving the school? The majority of our pupils were not from Chabad homes. There were many from homes, normal, Litvish or Yakish, Sephardic, whatever. And there was a certain stage, it is to this day, where they can go to seminary in England at the age of 16, 17, where they stay with us. Do I tell them to go to seminary? But the main point is that the Rebbe answered, then he told me to speak to Rabbi Chadakov about the details. According to the specific needs of each individual, what I took from this is about 45 years ago. What I took from this is that in everything you do and in any advice you give, it's not about you. And it's not even about the school. It's not about what are you trying to get out of it. You have to give to a person according to what they need. Part of that could be that the benefit of the klal is the benefit of the prat. Rabbi Chanukah, when we spent a long time in going into the details of the Rebbe's answer. But that is the point.
Beautiful. Wow. Not about you. It's about the kids. Amazing. And also, I love what you said, how they are the Limudei Kodesh, those how to run the home. That is a critical component. Okay, Rabbi Wolf, anything else that you want to add to this?
Okay. There's a reality going on out there, and I want to address that reality. The majority of the participants in this Zoom are Chabad parents. Bais Chana High School is made for Chabad parents. Correct me if I'm mistaken. And when I say Chabad parents, of course, there's a wide range coming from different types of homes and so on and so forth. It's Hadashava Chabad parents. The job of a Chabad school today, especially a high school or even a Masifta, is to give clear moral direction in a world that is most confusing. We're not like other very from Litvische or Chassidish schools that the children and the students are very secluded. We have issues with social media. We have issues with internet. Your kids are overwhelmed with information, whether we like it or not. The homes have internet. The homes have social media for good reasons, not such good reasons, whatever the case is. So we have to face that reality. And we must address it as a school by providing clear moral direction. I heard what Rabbi Taub said, what Rabbi Lew said, Fabrengens and everything. The Ikanakuda is to take away this confusion. What do I mean by this confusion? I recently showed a video to an 8th grade class. The video was a clip from the Rebbe. You can find it on YouTube. Where is God? Avu is God. I'm sure you have all seen this. A young man who talks about himself. He went off the derech and he had an acquaintance, and then he got involved with Rabbi Nussi Gerari and Handel. They told him that he should present his issues to the Rebbe. He was waiting for the Rebbe at the steps of 770 on a very cold January day. And the Rebbe arrived and he confronts the Rebbe with his question. His key question was, Shema Yisrael, Hashem, Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. What's the difference if we're talking about a Yid, if we're talking about an Indian, or if we're talking about a black man? And the Rebbe's answer is that the essence of a black man is to be what he is as a black man. The essence of an Indian is to be what he is as an Indian. And then the essence of a Jew is tied with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is in essence what the Rebbe answered. The kids that saw this video, and perhaps there was not explanation enough given to this video, had somewhat of an issue with the video. If kids, especially, our Lubavitcher kids are very open-minded. Don't forget, many of them are kids of shluchim, and even if they're not children of shluchim, they invite all sorts of people by the table. They hear all sorts of conversation. They hear many things on social media. The ani ve'amcha must be addressed, that what we stand for, Dashreinu Matev Chalkeinu, We are 100% different. Oni shehevi, osher shehevi kov, oni lo yotza. We have to know we are bechinas osher. Osher doesn't mean that we walk around and pat ourselves on the back. We have to understand that I was recently learning, I have a Seder, learning Tanya with a Litvish guy. We learned the first 24 prakim. It changed this whole outlook in life. Et nicht verstanden, what Yiddishkeit wants from him, from a young life. What is a Yid? What are the challenges? Challenges is a reality. Chassidus says, kids have challenges. We have to acknowledge those challenges, but we have to guide them and tell them, eschem ladas, these challenges are a learning experience. Yes, there's social media with everything going on, but the more we know what's going on, the more reiche Torah is. It's a GPS. A GPS. I told the kids, I remember driving without a GPS. I'm very terrible with directions. I used to drive with a city map, and I used to have trouble reading the city map. And I used to make mistakes. People can make mistakes in life. We have to know we can make mistakes. It's all right to make mistakes. It's all right to have challenges. There's a big world out there, a chaotic world, but we have a GPS. We don't have to run to a shofar organization. We don't have to run to other mekayres. We have what it takes. Tanya, Chassidus, Avodas Hashem. There's no greater clarity. There's a story. I come from Montreal with Rabbi Tenenhaus. There was a doctor, Tenenhaus, who I knew him well. I grew up next to him. His name was Reb David Tenenhaus. Reb David Tenenhaus was a professor in the McGill University in Montreal. I used to daven in the same shul of his. So one of the first times he went into Yechidus, of course, in Montreal, there was the celebrated chassid Reb Peretz Mochkin. Reb Peretz Mochkin, I'm sure Rabbi Lew, you knew him. I'm not sure Rabbi Taub, if you knew him. And he lived like another man, other man. He didn't even know he's another man, but he lived like another man. I remember living in a basement, and he used to make wine and dance on the grapes. And anyway, this Reb David goes into the Yechidus, and he's like questioning and complaining to the Rebbe. He says, it's the Yid in Montreal. This guy spoke Yiddish at David Tenenhaus. By the way, Rafi Tenenhaus is his son, a choshev v'shliach today in Florida. And he tells the Rebbe, a Yid vi Peretz Mochkin, a bitter or a man, that to go into Yechidus, he went into Yechidus before Reb David went in, he had to borrow somebody's sichos because his sichos was an old-time sichos. So he tells the Rebbe to go into Yechidus, he has to verborgen a sichos von a zweiten Yid. Und noch in da, it's a Goya, an actress that he named, I don't want to say her name. It's an actress, it's a Goyats, that she was in the news at the time, and she lives a tremendous life. So, wo Yoshev, wo der Rebbe, look at this wonderful big world that, that a Yid, wie Peretz Mochkin, has to suffer in his poverty. On Rishoyim, Gevrim, look at this world. You may call them Rishoyim, but they're Gevrim. That's what he asked the Rebbe. And the Rebbe told him that this Peretz Mochkin is a Freile Charid. He has his priorities straight. He doesn't even know that as another man, as Sefrid Masarat. That woman that you mentioned, we don't know what's going on in her life. I'm not sure how happy she is. 2 weeks later, that woman committed suicide. The V'neflinu v'ani v'amcha has to be much more because we are exposed with so much. And as a result of that, we have to be open. Yes, there's a big world out there. But if in the world, in Olam Abriya, there is doimim tzemeya chai u'medaber, and medaber is the bechir sheben Ephraim. I once heard from Rabbi Yitzchak Wolf, he said that when the Rebbe said, Va'atem tiyu li mamlechas kayin and b'gei kadosh, he meant Chabad Chassidim. Okay, he was a bit of a chauvinist. But he said, the Reichkeit for Chabad Chassidim, we have what it takes. They say that Rabbi Shmuel Lew told the Friedrich Rebbe, and the Friedrich Rebbe wasn't happy with that, or the Friedrich Rebbe heard what he said, that who are the true Yodeyas, Rebbeinu, Mechavim, Limrid Bay, is Dafka Chabad Chossid. No, Yodeyas, Rebbeinu. He knows the Rebbe, he knows Chassidus, Mechavim, Limrid Bay. The Friedrich Rebbe wasn't happy with that. But there's something to what he said. We have the answer. We have the Yodeyas, Rebbeinu. We know the preciousness of a Yid and the Ashreinu Matef Chalkeinu, and that must come across. And that is what a school has to teach. As Rabbi Taub said, of course we have to teach facts and figures, but those facts and figures have to be permeated with Kedusha. Just like when you teach a child, a 4 or 5-year-old child, Kometz Aleph O, every Litvisher that hears that you teach Kometz Aleph O, they laugh at you. In the methodology of teaching here, it's the worst thing to teach. You have to teach the comments, and you have to teach the sound and the consonant, with the ganze Shmedrei. Just teach them, but you're not teaching them just a method in how to teach what to teach. You're giving them Kedushas HaTorah. We, more than others sometimes, we have to give them that Kedushas HaTorah, Avas Yisrael, and Avas Hashem, and Avas HaTorah. Everything we teach has to be permeated with that. And the V'neflinu, the Ashreinu, perhaps we need it right now more than ever. And that is the Likud of a school.
Wow, amazing. So we have to have the Ashreinu aspect infused in every aspect of the school. And unfortunately, we are out of time to ask more questions at this point, because this is just unbelievable, so incredible how we're reframing or not even reframing, but just hearing it's so refreshing to hear the perspective of the Rebbe from so many different stories and letters and sichos and different places that you have all shared from your own learning and experience. It's just amazing. And again, it's really a sichos to have the 4 of you as our consultant Vaad HaChinuch for our new high school opening in the Delaware Valley next year called Bais Chana High School. And we're actually going to be opening registration this week. And you can see the philosophy going into the school, the foundation that we're trying to build everything on, of the role of the school being much more than just giving the academic standard, but being that wholesome experience that we just heard about. And really, just to sum up so much of what has been said, just focusing on, how to get the girls passionate, how to give boundaries, what is the school's role, and seeing that really it comes down to being that role model, having those relationships that are genuine, that the girls can open up about, that we didn't even get to get into as far as I had wanted to, because we're out of time now. But that it's really about the students and not about us, the educators, the parents. It's really about them and what we're giving them so that they can really learn. And that this is really critical, because it's the foundation of the rest of their lives, building them up from bottom up and with that love. So thank you all so much again for being here, and for everyone who listened. I guess, does anyone want to say one last concluding sentence? Any of our panelists? All right, you said a lot. Hopefully we'll have enough. Oh, Rabbi Lew, yes, Rabbi Lew. Wait 1 second, you're muted, Rabbi Lew.
Yeah, one very specific thing, not a close giving, but
okay.
Rabbi Wolf had this passionate, fantastic talk about how everything should be permeated. And he mentioned also the kale, that's the or always stays the same, the light, but the vessel, the receptacle changes with time, and that's the technology. But technology itself evolves, and we have sessions. The last couple of years over Zoom with specialists from an organization called TAG. Parents have to remain knowledgeable in how to protect their children in the best way.
Mm-hmm.
And what is available and how it's there without to do it in a very loving way, but it's got to be done. And one of the biggest problems today is parents not being aware of the dangers, and the children themselves not being aware of their own vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not a big ending sentence, but just to say to parents, maybe you should have this type of session more often.
Right.
About
Maybe we'll have to
going
make
through specific things.
part
But
two.
I think that this is for many families, especially as we heard, Chabad families, in our school, when I came here 56 years ago, in the boys' school, we were 90% not Chabad families, but mostly Orthodox. Today, we're 90% Chabad, or 85% Chabad. But there's a bigger diversity within the Chabad today than there was then between everyone put together. It was in the 60s, and now it's in the 2020s, and the Orah doesn't change. It's infinite, it's eternal, it's the Torah of Hashem. But knowing exactly how to be able to bring it in a way that will be appreciated and loved and part of that whole relationship, you have to keep yourself in the know.
Very nice.
Thank you very much for organizing. The Bais Chana High School should have Hatzlacha Gedola.
Amen. Amen.
Named after the Rebbe's mother, such a great person.
Right. Exactly. Thank you so much. Amen. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and have a beautiful rest of your day.